There are a few projects that almost every tabletop crafter dreams of tackling at some point. Dungeons come to mind, and of course a simple outdoor environment is probably on everyone's crafting list. Another project I am convinced many have considered is building their own fantasy city. A goal I'm taking my first steps toward in this video. For this, we first need to establish the basics. That means making a few city tiles, starting with the 12 by 12 cm MDF tiles I've used in nearly all my modular tile videos. However, instead of adding elevation with EPS or XPS foam, like I've done in the past, I used 1 cm thick honeycomb board. We recently bought a new wardrobe from IKEA, and the parts were safely packaged with this sturdy material as padding in various thicknesses. Now, I'm not suggesting that you go out and buy a brand new piece of furniture just to get crafting materials. But my point is that you can recycle a lot of things for your projects. Materials that would otherwise end up in the trash. This also highlights the flexibility of this modular approach. It doesn't really matter how you elevate your tiles, as long as you account for any adjustments that may come with using a different material. In this particular case, the biggest difference comes apparent when you want to magnetize these tiles. Unlike XPS, which has a dense structure, honeycomb board consists of numerous internal gaps, hence the name. This design makes it nearly impossible to drill into the sides and glue magnets in place. To counteract this, I cut 1 by 12 cm strips of paper and glued the magnets onto them. I used one of my existing tiles to ensure the polarity was correct for each piece. The magnets themselves were secured in place with a drop of superglue. Afterward, I glued the strips to the sides of the tiles, again being mindful of the correct polarity. For this step I used my hot glue gun, which has seen less and less use recently as I found better alternatives that don't involve the risk of burning my fingers. Even if you cut everything with extreme precision, it's still quite likely that some unwanted gaps will appear here and there. To cover these, I used masking tape. While it's not intended for sealing gaps, it works quite well in this context. I cut strips of tape into 14 cm and 11 cm lengths. First, I applied the longer strips to 2 opposing sides, folding the overhanging tape around the corners. Then I used the 11 cm strips on the remaining sides to cover the folds and, more importantly, to keep them in place. Masking tape isn't as sticky as other types of tape, so I also coated the sides with PVA glue. This not only seals the tape but ensures that everything stays securely in place. Next, I began cutting a large number of individual cobblestones and stone tiles from 2 mm thick cork sheets. For this project I used 3 different sizes, the largest at 2.8 cm, the medium-sized stones at 1.4 cm and the smaller stones with roughly 0.5 cm side length. For the 2 larger sizes, I already had pre-made templates made from MDF scraps. I created these a few weeks ago while testing my Proxxon table saw, which is perfect for projects like this. In fact, you can easily cut the larger bricks with it in a much more efficient and time-saving way. Now, if you're interested in getting one for yourself, I've included a link to the product on PK Pro, which has kindly provided me with an affiliate link for recommendations like this. If you decide to make a purchase through my link, I receive a small kickback, so please consider using it for your future hobby needs. As for the smallest cobblestones, I cut those the traditional way, as they are far too tiny to handle safely with the saw. I wasn't overly precise with these cuts. While I could argue that the variation adds to the natural look, it was more about accepting the difficulty of reproducing perfectly accurate cuts rather than striving for identical sized stones. With the stones ready, it was time to start adding them to the tiles. Since we're working exclusively with wood-based materials, PVA glue is by far the best choice for adhering them. I began by framing each tile with the 1.4 cm stones. This recurring element ties all the tiles together while allowing me the freedom to experiment with different patterns for the interiors. For instance, I created a cross in the center of one tile using the larger stones, then filled the empty corner areas with the smaller pieces. I arranged these smaller stones into circles, making the whole pattern resemble a radiating cross. Another pattern I wanted to try was a fan design. To make this easier, I created a template for myself. And if you'd like to use it in your crafting projects, you can download it for free on my Patreon. Link to that is, of course, down below. I cut the template to size and glued it onto the tile. With that in place, it was just a matter of filling the shapes with the smaller stones to form the fans. First outlining the pattern, then filling in the shapes. For added variety, I wanted a few tiles to be slightly elevated. To achieve this, I used the 9x9 cm MDF tile and glued popsicle sticks to its underside. This raised construction was then attached to the center of the main tile, leaving a 1.5 cm wide frame around the edges. I used a pre-cut MDF tile for convenience, but you can definitely use other materials like cardboard for this as well. On the outside, I added 6 mm thick cork strips and used my rotary tool to carve indentations every 1.5 cm. That created a pattern that mimics the look of individual stones, but is a bit more time efficient. Of course, using individual cork pieces would also be entirely feasible. The inside of these tiles was kept relatively simple. Partly this was to ensure they were completed quickly, but I also envisioned them as a kind of pavement, making the use of the larger 2.4 cm stones much more fitting for the design. In the end, I also wanted to create transitional tiles, essentially tiles where two ground textures meet. For this, I combined my city design with the natural ground texture I had used in my previous projects. I framed one half of the tile with the 1.4 cm stones and filled the framed area with smaller 0.5 cm stones to mimic the city texture. In hindsight, I think angling the smaller stones at 45 degrees would have made the design a bit more visually interesting. What do you think? In any case, with all these tiles now in place, I added the texture paste out of tile grout, roughed up the cork texture and applied that on the tiles. I wiped away the excess, and after that was thoroughly dried, I painted up the tiles in a very simplistic but effective way. Here I started with the dark grey primer, specifically this Vallejo primer. After that I applied an overall brown wash, which I mixed myself using transparent brown ink, a bit of water and matte medium. Then I dry brushed the tiles with neutral grey, followed by a lighter grey tone. Finally, I highlighted the tiles with a deliberately applied Molotov grey-blue light, which really makes the stones pop. But I wasn't finished with the colors at that point. I used various pigments to complement the look and add more visual variety and color to the pieces. After applying them, I sealed everything in with isopropyl alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol was also crucial in the following step. I wanted to add a bit of moss to the gaps between the tiles. Normally you would apply some PVA glue and sprinkle flock on top of it, which works well for large flat surfaces. But that's not really an option when you have tiny gaps between tiny stones. The solution was to apply a bit of fine flock roughly where I wanted it, then remove the flock from the top surface of the stones with a dry clean brush. After that I applied isopropyl alcohol, not with a spray bottle, but with a pipette. Immediately after that I used watered-down PVA glue, again with a pipette, to secure the flock in place. This process takes a bit of drying time, but in my opinion the end result is well worth it. And with that, my first batch of city tiles is done and ready for, at least for now, small-scale adventures in the city. I hope you enjoyed this one. If so, please like the video, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more videos like this. If you'd like to support my work, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon or making a hobby purchase via my affiliate links down below. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next one, so until then, farewell, fellow adventurers.